Hey friends, welcome to the Connected Mom podcast. So anybody that knows me and knows our family knows that we are really into sports. I mean, if I'm not speaking on a Saturday, I'm on the sidelines of a soccer game because out of our 14 grandkids, 6 of the boys play soccer. Our one granddaughter runs track. A bunch of them do golf. Some of them do football. I mean, we're into all the things. In fact, my husband Steve and I, for our 45th wedding anniversary, went to a Miami game to see Lionel Messi play. So we are really into sports. So when this book came across my desk as a possible podcast interview, I wondered to myself, okay, are these guys going to be the kind of people that are just bashing sports? Because if that's the case, I can't interview them authentically. But as I read the opening story, I thought I absolutely have to have them on because I relate to them. So our guests today are Brian Smith and Ed Usyznski, and they are both professional athletes. They are both mentoring professional athletes, and they have an important message for those of you who have your kiddos in sports. And I want to say at the beginning of the show, we are not going to do guilt. Okay. So all of us have messed up on the sidelines at one point or another, but I want you to hang in there and realize that the message really is about discipling your kids. So welcome, Brian, and welcome, Ed. I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a great intro, Becky. Great intro.
Well, thank you. It's truth. And so, okay, Brian, since I fell in love with the opening story, tell us the opening story about being at your kids' football game.
Oh goodness. I mean, this. I'm not sure if this puts me in the good graces with your audience or what, but here goes.
I think they're gonna love you, and just know we had to pick between like 50 different stories that we had to pick from between the two of us, and this one won out.
This was the one. Yep. So I was back at the same field a couple weeks ago, and I haven't told you this, and I was like triggering for me, like, oh, this was where it all went down. So anyway, here's the story. It was late in the fall, and my middle school son was playing tackle football. It's like his 5th year playing, and I'm actually in the process of writing this book while I'm at this game. And so when the game started, I was reminding myself, just enjoy the process. It's a playoff game, and they were most likely going to be one and done. They were playing a really good team, and it was on the other team's home field, so it was a away game for us. I was like, it's probably going to be a blowout. Just enjoy your kid having fun. And the refs were just. It was one of those games where it was like, everyone always says that's the worst game I've ever seen reffed. This was my worst game I've ever seen reffed. And so there are just multiple calls where we had big plays that were called back because refs were just not competent. And for the most part, I was holding my tongue in the stands, but there was one part late in the game where the refs called a holding penalty, which maybe your listeners know this, maybe they don't, but a holding penalty in football is a 10-yard penalty. And the referee started walking it off against our team, and he walked past 10 yards and he walked 20 yards. And so I just, like, without even thinking, I just screamed out from maybe scream is a strong word. I said loudly from the stand so the ref could hear me, holding is a 10-yard penalty, ref. And he looked up in the stands and he said, so what? And when he said that, it like ignited this bomb on our away game bleachers. You can't say that, ref. How dare you talk? And so it was just like chaos. And over the last quarter of the game, it had become evident that like the entire field and stands were already just soaked in gasoline. And I just threw the match on it by saying that to the ref. And so it was, I shared that story we do at the beginning to say like, yeah, we get it. Sometimes Ed and I are the ones that are causing the chaos in the stand. We're contributing to it. We get it. You mentioned we're professional athletes. I was actually going to let that slide. Ed probably wants to. We're not professional athletes. We're both high-level collegiate athletes.
In my opinion.
High-level collegiate athletes. I ran Division I track and cross country. So did my wife. We mentor professional, Olympic level, college athletes, all the way down to middle school athletes. I'm a high school coach, so I love sports. I am all in on sports, but I also love Jesus more. And I want to make sure that shines through in how I parent my kids in this stage of life. And so the book is, we joke all the time, we wrote it because we needed it. We needed a resource to help us live Christianly in the youth sports space.
I love that. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Ed.
Well, what we've experienced in our own lives and just what we've watched is how much of a separation there is for us as Christians. Again, there's a whole bunch to talk about on why that is, but that sports has almost become this thing that exists separate from our Christian faith. Like we've given ourselves permission to operate and act differently in that space than we do in other areas of our lives, or we're more conscious of what it means to bring faith to bear on it. So again, as we've been trying to figure it out for ourselves, we just said, we know this is a larger conversation within the church, let alone nationally, just period. How can we help us as parents do a better job of reintegrating faith with sports? Or maybe for some of us, for the very first time, to integrate faith and sports in this
Yeah,
at the same
I
time.
think it's just such an important conversation, and you do have parents that have opted out of all sports. That would have been detrimental to our family life. We've had a bunch of windows broken with soccer balls and continuing, and so we need kids out on the field, but how we disciple them is huge. So let's talk a little bit about the pressure that parents are putting their kids under. I mean, we've all been guilty of it, right? I mean, we want our kids to succeed. We all see, that little one, and we think this is going to be the next Olympic star, and, we can push without meaning to. So talk to me about that. What does that look like in terms of helping them follow Jesus?
Well, and there's a couple different ways we can talk about this. I'll grab one of them. Some of it, just again, on the more national scale, is that there's been this increased professionalization of sports, not just at the professional level, but all the way down to, 5 and 6 year old sports. In other words, we treat our 5 and 6 year olds almost the same way that professional athletes get treated, in terms of our expectations, in terms of always worrying about their future and whether they're living up to certain measurement categories, and the amount of money that we're putting in, the fear that they're falling behind in some way. Again, just like a professional athlete always feels fear that he or she are falling behind, that someone's going to replace them, always comparing themselves against other athletes and what they're doing all over the country. A lot of that has come from places like ESPN that have just had this global reach, where we all have been directly impacted by what they consider most important when it comes to sports, and this 24/7 news cycle that's based on analysis and evaluation. And it's just trickled into our own pores, how we act at a professional game. And again, the permission that we give ourselves to maybe scream and yell because we paid for a ticket, and scream and yell at everybody, whether it's the other fans or the coaches or our players or our coaches. We're doing that same thing at YMCA 6-year-old soccer games. And so that just, again, most of us as parents just don't even think about it. We're just kind of going along for that ride and don't realize how influenced we've been, and the amount of stress that that's creating for kids. It's already hard enough for a 20 or 22-year-old man or woman to live under that stress. I mean, that's why we have so many sports psychologists now that are associated with every team. How do we expect a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 13-year-old who, are already just trying to figure out how their body works and their mind works, and they're trying to learn the sport, and we're putting them under immense pressure. So that's one way it gets messy.
Yeah, it definitely does. And you mentioned money. Money is an interesting thing too, because I remember talking to a couple a few years ago whose son had done very well in soccer and was now going to try to play for a Division 1 school in the country, an Ivy League Division 1 school. And he was cut from the team. And they said all the money we put in trying to get him a scholarship, we could have just paid for his tuition, And I think, sometimes there's that too. I mean, obviously sports do cost money, and there's got to be a balance there somewhere. So how do you guys decide, like, how much is too much? How much is too little? How much do you invest in your kids in sports and all that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's It would be nice if there was some formula that we can have artificial intelligence create some sort of formula that gives our exact family situation, how much money's coming in, how good our kid is, the opportunities available. But there's just too many factors to kind of plug all of our information in. And then on the other side is here's a good biblical decision to make. Some of the guiding principles and data I would say for our family is realizing like there's actual research out there that says the more money you spend on youth sports, the less your kid enjoys the experience.
That is profound.
So just like let that sink in. This isn't just like Brian and Ed think this is true. They actually have data points that have researched this. And so for me, what does that mean? It means I just want to make sure for my kids who maybe do have aspirations to play beyond high school, and if there's opportunities that are going to cost money, I want to make sure that it is being led by them and not me. And that's probably the biggest thing I would tell to moms and maybe husbands who are listening too is if we as parents are the ones constantly driving the bus of all of their athletic adventures and signing them up for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and paying all this money without involving them in the process and giving them a voice, that's where we begin seeing these stats like 70% of kids quit by the age of 13, which again, that's a real data point in large part because we're spending too much money and it's not become fun for them anymore. And so I just, in my own parenting, I want to make sure my kids are saying, yes, I do want to sign up again for football this year. Yes, I want to play soccer. No, I don't want to play basketball. I want to try a different sport this year, instead of me just assuming, hey, we did it last year, we're automatically doing it again, no questions asked. Or even saying things like, the Smiths, we are a football family. So that means every fall we're playing football. I don't want to give my kids an identity that maybe they don't want to take on. So they at some level need to drive the bus of their sports participation.
I think that's really good. I was talking to my teenage grandson yesterday. He's 15 and he's taking a sports psychology class in his school. And it's very interesting because they were teaching that there's two different kinds of coaching. You know, one is a yeller and a screamer and really trying to motivate from outside. One is just allowing the kid to be self-motivated and encouraging that. And now it's been proven, I think I have this right, not completely sure, that when the kids are self-motivated and the coach is just promoting that, the team actually does better. And I thought that was really interesting because not only coaches, but as parents, we can put our expectations on the kids, you know, and we've probably all done it, right?
For sure. You know, so Becky, somebody gave us this advice. I don't remember who, but I thought it was really insightful about the need in the same way, you know, how we handle our money as a family. It's helpful sometimes to sit down and do a long-term planning budget where you really take inventory of what you have, what it's going to cost to do certain things. And they encourage us to do the same thing when it comes to our sports economy, so to speak. So we have kids that are playing sports, and sometimes you don't even realize what this is going to be until you've done it for a year or two. That's what's hard. But to actually try to map out what is it going to cost us time-wise to have all three of our kids playing in this particular league or in this sport. Like, let's really look at the calendar as best we can and see what the effect is going to be 3 months down the road when we're going to have kids that are in different parts of the country trying to play games. Like, and we're talking about trying to make decisions about what we should or shouldn't do, to try to forecast as much as possible, not just what their skill level is going to be, but what is this immediate decision going to cost us as a family? And just like Brian said, once we've actually asked them what they want to do, what can we do and still stay sane as a family in this season? And to do that without worrying about falling behind, or worrying that if we're not on this A team, that somehow we're going to be significantly behind the curve 5 years from now if we play on the B team and we stay more local. That's one of the biggest lies that Brian and I have been trying to shoot down, both out of our own experience and the research again, that says if your kid makes it in high school, it's going to be for a million factors that are outside your control. It just is. And so don't fall for that, you know, marketing ploy that you've got to be with this group at this time or this coach at this time in order for them to have a different 5-year future. It's just not true.
You know, I heard and I don't know if this is true, guys, but I heard that Michael Jordan didn't play varsity basketball in high school, that he was cut or something and had to play JV,
He did. He got
and
cut. Yeah.
like, look at where he went, so I think a lot of times parents and grandparents, I mean, we're all guilty of it, right? You want the best for your kid, so it's easy to push them. But let's talk about discipling them. Like, how do you have conversations both on the way to a game and on the way home from a game about Jesus and how this plays out in sports?
Yeah, let me start by just talking about why sports is such an effective place to disciple, and then Ed, maybe we can bounce back and forth and talk about particulars. But when my kids get home from school, every single day, I'm asking the same dumb question: "How was your day?" And I get the predictable answer, right? It was good, or it was okay. And because I was not sitting in class with them or at the lunch table or in the halls next to their locker, I don't know the interactions that they had with their classmates. I don't know what the teacher said to them or didn't say to them. I don't know who bullied them or maybe who they bullied. So I really have no idea what happened at school, which makes it really hard to come alongside and disciple them. In sports, we don't have to guess. We have a front row seat to seeing them go through every emotion possible, usually like in a 60-minute game, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. We see how they interact with their teammates, with their coaches, with the opponents, sometimes with other fans. And all of this is incredible opportunity if we're willing to look past the earthly metrics and partner with God and say, God, what is going on here that I can see what my kid's really good at, maybe the gaps in their life. Help me to see with almost like heavenly scouting ability, ways that I can take these moments that I'm seeing on the field and turn them into like character building discipleship conversations. And so sports just provides ample opportunity for us to see incredible things. And again, we don't have to guess. We're seeing it. We can say, tell me more about when the ref made this call. What was going on in your heart and your mind? Why do you think you said exactly what you did when that happened today? So,
Well, and we'll come back to specifics again, but let me say this. So to go along with what Brian said, it's hard enough to be a parent and to wear that identity.
Seriously.
Attempting to be a Christian parent adds a whole nother level of, I don't know, stress to the process. I was like, none of us really fully knows what we're doing. We're trying to figure it out along the way. But then we want to add another identity marker, and that is discipler. Like we are supposed to be our kids' first discipler. Brian and I talk about being a sport missionary. I'm a sport missionary in my own home with 4 kids in it who play sports. And that in and of itself can just like kind of take it to a whole nother level of stress on the one hand. On the other, it's an identity that I just need to grow comfortable with. Like Brian said, like I have to own that first, that I'm the first line of defense for my kids as they head into the world for them to become a Jesus follower. It's not all on me, but if there's at least some role that I have, a biblical role that says you as the parent are going to teach them, you're going to raise them up in the way they should go. So to Brian's point, sport's going to provide a bunch of opportunities. I'm going to first need to have to embrace that identity as that being a role that I'm supposed to play. I'm not going to be measured on whether they made their high school team. I'm going to be measured on whether I was repeating over and over again, this is what the kingdom looks like. This is what the kingdom looks like. So again, I'll pass it back to Brian. So for example, when the gospel is telling us that agape love should characterize us as followers of Jesus, we don't usually think about what that means for a 6-year-old at a soccer game. We think we need to think about that though. So again, let me throw it back to you, Brian. So like, what does love look like? How do we teach a concept like love to our kids? Thanks for the setup, because I'm trying to live this right now with my 10-year-old son who's playing his 3rd year of tackle football. And he's one of the smaller, younger kids on the team. And by nature, he's just not aggressive. And so I'm trying to motivate him to be more aggressive. And so 2 weeks ago, I said, hey, Judah is his name. I'm going to pay you like $1 for every tackle you make on the field. Because I want him to, I know he's motivated. He likes to buy toys and video game stuff. So I'm going to give you some money. And we tried that for a week and it went okay. Then I was thinking,
Brian, you should probably read your own book. Like, if you're trying to use sports as a pathway to disciple him and you're pouring money into this system, what would it look like to invest a little bit of money into his character? So I thought, you know what, Judo, we're going to change things next week. I'm going to give you $10 a week if you at practice every day encourage 3 people and then help 3 people up from the ground. And I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I'm trying to help him use his words to encourage other people, to take the focus off of self and encourage other people. And I'm trying to help him see people who are lying on the ground that may need a helping hand to get up. And I'm hoping that will translate into some sort of like seeing and caring for other people, even if it costs me $10 a week. That's completely a worthwhile investment.
Absolutely.
It really is, because the culture of sport is not going to teach him to encourage other people, and it's not going to teach him to look out for the people who are laying down, who needs a hand up. That's my job as a parent, and he might just need some financial motivation to do it.
Absolutely. Steve, my husband and I always joked that if we ever wrote a book on parenting, it would be called Blackmail, Bribery, and a Whole Lot of Prayer. I have been known to pay for all kinds of things, even with the grandkids, and so I love that. But that's a good use of your money.
Yeah. Well, a listener might hear that and think that, well, you're teaching them to be soft, which again, I just want to think, well, where are we getting that from, that it's soft to help somebody up off the field? You're playing a competitive, aggressive, physical sport. You just knocked them down. Why is it so wrong then, or contrary, to help them back up? Again, we got that value from somewhere outside of us that said, you're soft if you do that. And again, I would credit ESPN and some other sources like that have kind of reinforced that you need to, stand over them, because that's what they celebrate on their clips. And it's like, well, no, you can knock them down, and there's actually a strength in helping them back up. There's a Christian strength in saying, I'll help you back up, and I'm going to knock you back down again. Those two things can go together, but we'll never see it if we haven't stepped back to realize we're being discipled to think a certain way about sports that goes against the kingdom. And we have a responsibility to counter that with very intentional teaching that says, actually, this is what it looks like to be a Christian in the midst of playing your sport. We just don't usually think that way.
Yeah. So let's talk about those conversations on the way to the game and on the way home from the game, because I think a lot of times that's where a lot of stress happens for both parents and kids.
Here's one of the things that I've needed to learn. Again, we're on a short podcast right now, relatively short. I've got 4 kids. One of them is a 9th grader. The other 3 are in college. So we've been joking. I've got one more chance to try to get this right with my kids. This is what I do have historically done on the way to games. I am feeling performance stress for him or her. I want to load them down with things to think about that will make their experience, and really my experience, go better at the game today, because I want to see them do certain things better, which again, doesn't mean I'm an evil person. It just means I'm a parent that wants to see my kid perform well. That's probably going to result in, and has resulted in, me trying to overload them with a bunch of thoughts. Their critical thoughts, their performance thoughts, their here's how this can go better for you thoughts. They more often than not just want me to be quiet. They don't want all that before a game. Literally, again, this is fresh. My 9th grader was in a golf match yesterday in a golf tournament. And the night before, he came in to say goodnight to my wife and I said, Trey, are you open to me giving you just one thought for tomorrow's tournament? And he looked at my wife and he looked at me and he said, Dad, no. I really don't want anything else to think about. He said, that's probably not the answer that you were hoping for, which again, he's the most articulate of all 4 of our kids. And I just smiled again, because Brian and I are talking about this all the time.
I love that you're still learning it.
Listen, I wanted, even now, I asked for permission, but I really wanted to give him some things to think about. And he just said, I really don't want that. I just want to play. I just want to play. And I have to wrestle, as Amy and I laid there and talked about it, with, is that okay? Why can he not just go and play? Why do I have to try to give him something corrective, something that's going to help him? I hope at some point in these 4 years, he'll want input from me. But most of the time, our kids really don't want to hear a bunch of pregame input. They want us to remove stress for them. They want us to help make sure that their stuff is lined up before we leave the house, that they've got their uniform, their snack, again, it's different between 6 and 18, different things that they need to feel secure. They want to make sure we get there early enough that they're not stressed and running out on the field when stretching is already happening, which again, I've been so guilty of that because I'm never on time for anything. And I create stress for them. They want to be there 15 minutes early. I should put more energy into that and less into shaping my performance correction list before the game. Make sure they've eaten well. Help them get to sleep the night before. These things that are just going to create a more holistic, positive way for them to enter into the sport experience instead of just trying to be their coach, their trainer, their performance trainer. So that's what I'd say on the front. Brian, would you say anything about the front end?
I think you nailed that, and I've had, you've said this many times, Ed, and I believe it now, that most kids don't really care about getting better. They just want to go have fun and play. It's us who want to put them on this trajectory to getting better and to really be the best that they can possibly be. Most kids aren't thinking long term when they get on the field. It's another opportunity for them to go out and play. We're the ones that want to maximize it. And again, oftentimes with good intentions, right? Like most parents are good, well-intentioned parents. We're not trying to become like the stereotypical ESPN crazy parent. We just want our kids to play well, and we know what needs to happen for them to do that. But most of the time it's just adding on stress for them. The ride home is just as significant, if not more significant, than the ride to in large part, there's a rule in psychology called the peak end rule. And the peak end rule is essentially going to teach us that we remember things in our life largely by how those events or experiences ended. So if you can think of kids who they just played a game on Saturday, they hop in a car, again, well-intentioned parents, the drive home, they're hearing critique, coaching, maybe not being criticized, but it's received as such, of like, why did you pass to him? Hey, this was good when you did this. Next time, why don't you do that? Why did coach put you in here? What kids want from us in that moment is just to connect. And so what's happening with kids, again, this is where we get the 70% are quitting before the age of 13. A lot of those kids have said it's the car ride home is the reason for that. They're feeling like they get in the car and they're falling short of mom and dad's expectations. And so they're remembering almost this might be a little too extreme, but the totality of their youth sports experience as I wasn't up to mom and dad's standards again. I did think some things okay, but I can always do better. I can always do better. I can always improve. And it's building into this system of like, if I want mom and dad to love me, I need to perform a certain way. And so this should concern us as Christians. Like that, if there's anything more anti-gospel than if I perform, then mom and dad love me, that's oftentimes what my kids are experiencing in sport from me. Again, unintentionally, I don't want that. What do they need from me in the car ride home? Hey, I love you. I'm so proud of you. I enjoyed watching you play today, and I'm going to bite my tongue and not say, if you would have done this, I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Here's my question that I ask my kids. Is there anything that happened at practice or in the game today that you want to talk about? And 99% of the time, they just say, no. Can I play games on your phone? Sure. And I turn on the radio. I turn on sports talk radio and listen to that while they're playing Brawl Stars or whatever game the kids play on the phone these days.
Are we going to go get ice cream? But then what I need, and Brian and I have talked about this a ton, even recently, since we're spending so much time having these conversations. I need to assess what's going on inside of me as a dad. I know there's moms that need to do this too. Why am I so frustrated right now that he doesn't want to talk about getting better? What is it's a game. Again, we're not talking about, the classroom, which might be a different discussion. We're not talking about his performance at a job that he or she gets when they're 15 or 16 and they're being really sloppy. And so maybe that's going to have life effect if they don't get that right. We're talking about a sport that they wanted to play because it was something fun. How did that turn into me feeling angry that he doesn't want to get better right now as a 14-year-old? He just wants to play and see if he even likes the game at all because he just started playing golf 3 months ago. So he just wants to play. Why am I feeling fear inside of me? Why am I feeling some regrets, if I'm honest? And I'm kind of looking at decisions I made when I was in 9th grade that I'm trying to project onto him. Or again, my daughter, I felt this same thing, that I'm afraid for them that they're going to not get more out of sports than I did. And I want them to have something better than me. They haven't said they want something better than me. They want to have their own sport experience. I want them to want what I want for them. Well, that's a me problem, Becky. It really is. It's hard to say that. It's a little embarrassing. And, we don't like when those kind of yucky things come out to the surface. And again, we're not even sure who to talk to them about. We usually just stuff them back down if we even are aware of them at all. Most of us don't really think about it until it's too late. And now my 25-year-old, for example, and this is not actually literally happening, but the fear is that my 25-year-old won't want to come home for Thanksgiving because of the way we operated for 7 or 8 years on the car ride home after sports, and the way our relationship was just subtly and just this thin layer of rejection that they feel from me all the time, or this thin layer of they never live up in my eyes. And who wants to come home to that father? Who wants to come home to that? Especially if I've done that to them in other areas of life, which a lot of us do that. We treat them in sports this way, but we also put the same kind of pressure on them in other areas of life that maybe even do matter more. And so their whole experience of us is just one of constant correction and performance evaluation. And we're not even talking about spiritual stuff. We're talking about the way they perform at a game causes them to not want to come close to me. I don't want that with my kids.
Yeah. I feel like this is such a profound conversation, and I wish we had more time. But I think that, like, asking yourself those questions is deeply insightful. What is this really about? Am I disappointed in my child? And if so, why? Because they're just trying to have fun, and what does God want to teach me through this, and how do I best connect with my child on the way home, and help reassure them, because as you say, they either want to play games on your phone or they want ice cream or In-N-Out burger or something else, right? And so these are big questions. Hey, we are out of time, but moms, I want you to hop on Amazon right now and get this book. If you have your kids in any sport, whether soccer, basketball, football, golf, whatever they're playing, you really need this book because it is really loaded with a lot of truth. I wish the book had been out years ago for my husband and I as we were raising our kids. I remember one coach kept telling us when my daughter was 7 that he was going to take her all the way to the Olympics for swimming. Well, that didn't happen, and I'm glad that didn't happen, right? But there's a balance here. We need to be discipling our kids. So the name of the book is Away Game. Go on Amazon and buy it, or wherever else you buy Christian books. It could be in your Christian bookstore. It probably is on christianbook.com, or you can buy it from David C. Cook Publishers, but get the book and maybe ask your husband if you two can read it together so that you have a game plan for your kids that's unified, because these are important conversations. Hey guys, Brian and Ed, it was incredibly delightful to have both of you on. I think this is one of the best interviews I've done. So thank you. And thank you so much. And friends, I hope you'll join us next week again for another episode of the Connected Mom Podcast. Again, the goal is to help you connect more deeply with God, your fellow moms, and your kiddo. So if you're not connecting, you have less of a chance to motivate them towards the things of God. So thanks for joining us today. And we hope you're going to join us again next week, and share this episode with your friends, with other parents on your kids' sports teams, because I think they're going to find it enlightening as well.